Hotep family. Great to see everyone. And for the purpose of the recording, once again, I am Dr. Nteri Nelson, a metaphysician, clinician, and educator, and co-founder of the Academy of Kemetic Education and Wellness. And excited again to be here with you, and so glad that you chose to spend your Sunday morning here in the Building the Lighted Temple Wisdom Service. Once again, Spirit is revealing, and we have an amazing presentation today. And we will be moving swiftly, celestially and terrestrially. So one thing this Building the Lighted Temple Wisdom Service will do is to accelerate how you shapeshift celestially and terrestrially. So we are beginning. And it is in the midst of these troubled times, family, that we come together on these Sundays in these ethereal waters, this universalizing resonant vibrational field, this etheric space, this virtual space where we can amplify our vibration and distribute the light. So this is liberated space. And just want to say good morning to folks where folks are arriving. Just some news, NU''S, that our class is completed. We just finished having a teacher training and administrative training meeting just prior to the start of today's Sunday service. So that's what had me a few minutes behind. But we are so delighted that so many of you are going to be participating in these foundational studies. Today, we will be continuing with the dualities that we've been looking at: life, death, good, evil, darkness, light, Ma'at, Isfet. And the title of today's talk is The Law of Repulse, Uninstalling White Supremist Software in Our Equipment. So we continue with the Kemetic Technology for remaking ourselves as beings of light. So we are going to continue with these dualities and this dissonance. Today, looking at the duality of the law of repulse versus the law of attraction. Now, we're probably very versed in the law of attraction, but we need to understand how the law of repulse serves at this time. So do put your questions in the question and answer and your chat in the chat. And put your seatbelts on, family, because here we go. And today's presentation, this talk will also expand on the presentation that I gave to ASCAC on October 16th, many of which you were in attendance, gratefully so. And that was entitled Liberating Our Hearts and Minds Through the Wisdom of Our Ancestors, Building for Eternity. But what is added today, starting with the title, will be Liberating Our Hearts and Minds Through the Wisdom and Love of Our Ancestors, Building for Eternity. Because this presentation today is addressed to all people. It is addressed to all people. And George James, who is our foremost ancestor in the Academy, has instructed us that we must have address to all people as well in this struggle that we're in. And why is love added to the title? liberating our hearts and minds through the wisdom and love of our ancestors. First of all, not all people regard the ancestors that I'm talking about as their ancestors. So there is a problem in this human family that has these seeming racial types that don't regard our African ancestors as their ancestors. So that's number one, through the wisdom of our ancestors and the love. Now, why is love important? Well, love and wisdom go together, but foremost, family, it is within these seeming racial types. We'll talk specifically about white supremacy that have taken our wisdom, but there's been no love for those who it has been taken from. So we are on a correction course, even with the title. So what is the law of repulse? It is a law when used, harnesses the will to dissipate misappropriated energy, that which would disrupt unitive consciousness. Again, family, we have talked about misappropriated energy, or otherwise said, energy that is used in an evil way. The law of repulse is a law when used, harnesses the will to dissipate misappropriated energy, that which would disrupt unitive consciousness. And energy is energy, and it may be appropriated or misappropriated, and energy just returns to its source. So as it is harnessed and used, we address whether it is being used appropriately, and then we must apply the law of repulse to that which is misappropriated. We liberate our hearts and minds by remaining poised in a higher vibration of remembrance. We know the times before Oppressor went to the banquet. Yes, we've been talking about that banquet. We liberate our hearts and minds by remaining poised in a higher vibration of remembering the beauty of unitive consciousness within us, which is our inheritance. Before things fell apart, before the cutting of the body of Oppressor by Set or Satesh into 14 pieces of brokenness and consciousness. And family, we remember to practice daily the corpus of law, the laws of my art that our ancestors have given us, that we live lives that are established in truth, justice, and balance. But how to live in accord with universal law while existing under man-made laws and the injustices that have been caused by these man-made laws. And so, family, it is now that we tie into what has been called critical race theory, because we are moving celestially and coming to earth with a thud. When we ask how to live in accord with universal law while existing under man-made laws and the injustices that have been caused. And we turn to the New York Times for an article published in July 9th, 2021, which says that, quote, the theory argues that historical patterns of racism are ingrained in law and other modern institutions, and that legacies of slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow still create an uneven playing field for Black people and other people of our color. The idea is that racism is not a matter of individual bigotry, but is systemic in America. Recently, critics have made CRT, critical race theory, a catch-all target for opposition to equity efforts, affirmative action, and wokeness in general. Now, Beloveds, are you feeling like you're part of the woke group, or interesting phraseology and a term very descriptive. The article goes on to say that conservatives object that critical race theory is a gauntlet thrown down to accuse all whites of being racist, of dividing people of race into oppressors and the oppressed. Another article cited in the Education Week newsletter says that the source, and this is a source of high quality news and insights on K-12 education, says that critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old, and that the core idea is that race is a social construct, and that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in legal systems and policies. So here we are as educators, dealing with how things have come to earth with a thud as it relates to critical race theory. The basic tenets of critical race theory emerged out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 70s and early 1980s, created by legal scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado, among others. There have been others that I've seen named as well. And the topic has exploded in the public arena this spring, especially in K-12, where numerous state legislators are debating bills seeking to ban its use in the classroom. So just like these efforts are trying to sweep the country in terms of banning this, with legislation to ban this education, likewise with voting rights, these same efforts are a brew among us. The article goes on to say that the events of the last decade have increased public awareness about things like housing segregation, the impacts of criminal justice policy in the 1990s, and the legacy of enslavement on Black Americans. But there is much less consensus on what the government's role should be in righting these past wrongs. And then add children and schooling into the mix, and the debate becomes especially volatile. So this is the moment in which we find ourselves. It goes on to say, when followed to its logical conclusion, CRT is destructive and rejects the fundamental ideas on which our constitutional republic is based. Now think about this, family, and this is what the organization is claiming. Think about those words. When followed to its logical conclusion, CRT is destructive and rejects the fundamental ideas on which our constitutional republic is based. Well, we as Black, brown people have been trying to get the Constitution to work for us since its inception. And so interesting phraseology and how people are seeing critical race theory. Now, in using our Kemetic technology for remaking ourselves as beings of light, we steep ourselves as African people, we steep ourselves in the reading of our primal wisdom. So we're shifting to celestially now, so it informs our terrestrial walk. We steep ourselves in the reading of our primal wisdom to remember what was important and of value to our ancestors, and remembering that the divine trinity of Oppressor and Osset and Heru is within us. So here they're talking about the Constitution. We're talking about what do our sacred texts say. The previous article goes on to say, does critical race theory say all white people are racist? Isn't that racist too? You'll see our Kemetic technology has that in place that would you know, wouldn't allow us to be so. But the former paper says, the theory says that racism is part of everyday life. So people, white or non-white, who don't intend to be racist can nevertheless make choices that fuel racism. Some critics claim that the theory advocates discriminating against white people in order to achieve equity. Well, that's not what our Kemetic technology would say. So here is, however, our Kemetic technology says the following. So now we read from the Pertimru. And like Ani described, our ancestor, we as African people, we practice daily to be as Oppressor. And we, like Ani, striving to be as Oppressor, we are coming in into the hall of the Menta. We're coming before the scales. And as we do so, we want to be able to affirm. What's important to us is to be able to affirm that as Ani, that he has not been in violation of the laws of Ma'at. And in the Pertimru on page 18, we read, behold Oppressor Ani. He says, I am in your presence, O Neb of Amentet. There is no fault in my body, not have I spoken lies with knowledge, not have I acted with double intent. In other words, spoken out of both sides of one's mouth, been two-faced or talked with a forked tongue, etc. As I've said previously, all the things we see today. And as we look around today, we simultaneously glimpse at what our ancestors held to be of value, the standard of how we should conduct ourselves in truth, not lies. So we then move, family, to ask the following. Can those who are complicit with a white supremacist paradigm come before the scales of Ma'at? After all, have not all the laws been broken? You know, I hold up, as you have before you now, also the laws of Ma'at. And as we go through, we can see all the laws that have been broken. Even if we take, I have not robbed with violence, I have not stolen. Our lands have been stolen, our bodies have been stolen, our babies have been stolen, and so on, and so on, and so on. I have not done murder, I have done no harm. We have been murdered, we have been slaughtered. And we can go through and see each law has been violated. So, family, we ask the question, can those who are complicit with white supremacy come before the scales of Ma'at? After all, have not all the laws been broken? Now, this ties in here with how is this addressed in the classroom? How can this be addressed in the classroom? And then we read from the previous article that one teacher educator puts it this way. It says, the way we usually see any of this in a classroom is, quote, have I thought about how my Black kids feel and made a space for them so that they can be successful? That is the level I think it stays at for most teachers. The article goes on to say, like others interviewed for this, the teacher educator did not want to be named out of fear of online harassment. So to be sympathetic, does not cancel systemic. it's a bit of a start. You know, I remember when I was in college, we were reading this this work in a class I had, and there was insult after insult of Black people in this text. And I went to the teacher on more than one occasion and pointed that out. And she was very sympathetic. But systemically, the next class coming in would read that same material. The article then continues by saying, an emerging subtext among some critics is that curricular excellence cannot coexist alongside culturally responsive teaching or anti-racist work. Think about that. They don't think it can exist side by side, to be culturally responsive and anti-racist at the same time. Their argument goes that efforts to change grading practices or make the curriculum less Eurocentric will ultimately harm Black students or hold them to a less high standard. Look at the paternalism there. Look at the paternalism at the sake of the self-esteem of Black children. The article then goes on to say, a recent poll by the advocacy group Parents Defending Education claims some schools were teaching that white people are inherently privileged while Black and other people of color are inherently oppressed and victimized, that achieving racial justice and equality between racial groups requires discriminating against people based on their whiteness, and that the United States was founded on racism. The laws of Ma'at would not have us operate in this way, but we can see that celestial connection is far disconnected from what some folks are informed to do on the terrestrial realm. It goes on to say that much of the current debate appears to spring not from the academic texts, but from fear. This fear is this big word, all-encompassing, among critics that students, especially white students, now here's the key, family, will be exposed to supposedly damaging or self-demoralizing ideas. And I ask here, do you mean as in damaging or self-demoralizing the image and likeness as Oppressor? Because we continue in our reading of the Pertim Rule, as Oppressor, Ani is asking that I may be like the favored ones who are about you, and Oppressor, those who have attained to be as like Oppressor, that we may affirm in the language of Medjanecha, Anuk Oppressor, my father and I are one. I am as Oppressor, favored greatly of the Necher beautiful, and beloved of the Neb, Lord of the world. So Ani is beseeching to be beloved, the royal scribe, to be true and veritable, who loves him. And we raise our vibration by what and who we love and value as truth. Ani Makaru, triumphant, before and as like, and restored to be as like Oppressor, in the image and likeness. This is what our African ancestors found of value and have taught us of value and teach and leave us as of value. The other article goes on to say, as of mid-September, legislation purported to outlaw critical race theory in schools, and laws have been passed in Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, and have been proposed in various other state houses. The bills are so vaguely written that it's unclear what they will affirmatively cover. And the article asks the question, could a teacher who wants to talk about a factual instance of state-sponsored racism, or, talk about what happened as a current event, what happened with George Floyd, or like the establishment of Jim Crow, the series of laws that prevented Black Americans from voting or holding office and separated them from white people in public spaces, could just teachers talking about this be considered in violation of these laws? Think about this, family, as you are educating others, what educators out there are up against. It is also unclear whether these new bills are constitutional or whether they impermissibly restrict free speech. So there now becomes, family, these new kinds of arrests. We had the physical arrest, put you in, but now there's going to be these mental arrests in these so-called spaces of learning or in public settings or higher institutions. Mental unrests for positive imaging. So any positive imaging, any attempt to speak in a more positive imaging way can be arrested. Why? Because as in before, the saying currently, we are being uppity, meaning we are seeking to see ourselves as, or they're trying to see themselves as greater than we have circumscribed them to be. The article then goes on to say, it would be extremely difficult in any case to police, that's a strong word, what goes on inside hundreds of thousands of classrooms. But social studies educators fear, here's the word fear again, that such laws could have a chilling effect on teachers who might self-censor their own lessons out of concern for parent or administrative complaints. So we see what's happening now in the censoring and the sealing that is starting to press down even more in educational settings. And as an English teacher cites, history teachers can no longer adequately teach about the Trail of Tears, the Civil War, and the Civil Rights Movement. English teachers will have to avoid teaching almost any text by an African-American author because many of them mention racism to various extents. So they certainly couldn't read my book in any classroom or a spacious, well-funded university. How is, or Sheikh Anta Diop or John Henry Clark and so on. How is this related to other debates over what's taught in the classroom amid K-12 culture wars? And now they're called culture wars, family. The charge is that schools are indoctrinating students in a harmful theory or political mindset is a long-standing one, historians note. So the historians themselves are speaking about this as truths. As with critical race theory criticisms, the fear was that students would be somehow harmed by exposure to these ideas. But family, let us ask, which students are they referring to here? Think about all the ideas we've been exposed to inside and outside of the classroom and what harm they have exposed us to in our self-esteem. In history, the debates have focused on the balance among patriotism and American exceptionalism on one hand, and the country's history of exclusion and violence toward indigenous people and the enslavement of African Americans on the other, between its ideals and its practices. Those tensions led to the implosion of a 1994 attempt to set national history standards. So again, clamping down. And the article goes on to say, a current example that has fueled much of the recent round of CRT criticism is the New York Times 1619 project, which sought to put the history and effects of enslavement, as well as Black Americans' contribution to democratic reform at the center of American history. So let me just, I'm going to come right back and just see if there's any questions. So, okay, great. We're up to 18 and it seems like everyone's on listening mode. And so I'll just continue until I see a question. So family, what has happened in our spiritual and psychological journey of unfolding consciousness? As we made our outgoing footsteps out of Africa to populate the world, we have the arising of the seeming racial types and the pages turn that would unfold a white supremacist paradigm that has gripped planetary consciousness. And family, we have subsequently had many impacts along the way. And as many of you know, I have been teaching the last 25 years about this dimensional shift we are now making, that we are in this vertex of the V, and we are making a shift from a materialization consciousness cycle in which gives birth to white supremacist paradigm in its depths. And we are now reshifting to a re-spiritualization in consciousness cycle. And so we are in this battle, and we've talked about that, how fierce this battle is. And I characterize that white supremacist paradigm, that materialization in consciousness, as a fire-breathing dragon. And it has been dealt a death blow. But it is most dangerous now, and it's writhing and gasping for its last breaths. And so we have to be, as I have said, watch out for the fire that it breathes out, but also the whipping around of that tail that would take all in its midst with it as this cycle closes. And those who have made their ascent are moved within this fuller re-spiritualization of consciousness cycle. Now, interestingly enough, family, Biden, our president, is fond of saying the same thing in a slightly different way, and without the metaphysical, astrological, astronomical understanding. He says we are at an inflection point. And so what is the definition of inflection point? The definition is in differential calculus and differential geometry, and an inflection point or point of inflection, flex or inflection, is a point on a smooth plane curve at which the curvature changes sign. In particular, in the case of the graph of a function, it is a point where the function changes from being concave downward, to convex, concave upward, or vice versa. There you go. So, sound familiar? Yet, when we look at this inflection point, family, at this time in the vertex of the V, when injustice could be addressed, because we're at the point where we get it right or we don't. We greet the following in outcry by whites on the subject of critical race theory. Thus, there is a good deal of confusion over what critical race theory means, as well as its relationship to other terms. As this article says, anti-racism, social justice, with which it's often, conflated. So family, as I have said, where we are, when we look outside of ourselves, we might bewail what we see taking place. Ask, how did we get to this place? And why do we ask that? Because the divinely patterned, archetypal, natural, spiritual beauty within us does not match up with what we behold when we look outside. There is a mismatch between what we behold within and what we behold without in the outer world. And as I have spoken before, a recent example is how we looked out and were horrified by the images of George Floyd and the surrounding events. And as I have spoken previously, history is replete with these images of the white supremacist paradigm and that tell us we are among a people who would go to public hangings of African people for sport and entertainment, go to the slaughter of animals for decoration and sport. And we know, family, that their visceral response to these images are syntonic and resonant with their vibration versus dystonic of what we would feel. And we have learned, family, that they have cultivated an appetite for such images. And we're going to come back to what that word images. They have cultivated an appetite for such images, thus a passion to create events in the external world that match their internal images and satisfy their vile, debased appetites. So again and again, whether we are looking from behind the eyes of Kunta Kinte and horrified, or Frederick Douglass and horrified, our horror in looking out has not changed. So in our Kemetic technology for remaking ourselves as beings of light, so here we move celestially, and to understand our equipment, which is human and divine, and we use the tree of life to understand our constitution, our equipment, which is human and divine. We understand that, as we've talked previously, that Auset is the divine mother within us. And when I hold up this tree of life, you can see Auset here, and she is the divine mother within us. And that Haru here is also part of our equipment, our makeup, human and divine, that Haru is the sun, daughter within us. But we understand that these emotions, that these events in the world trigger for us, these emotions and their corresponding traumatic images register in the waters of Auset. Register in the waters of Auset and in the heart and consciousness of Haru, all right? So we just hold those thoughts a moment. So how do we use the Kemetic technology for remaking ourselves as beings of light and undergo a resolarization as and like the sun, a re-stellarization of ourselves as we re-immerse ourselves in the waters of noon, the primal waters? Well, we start with Auset, and we understand that Auset is the noon within, is the noon noon within, those waters within. And we can locate that here as we look at this diagram, or set the waters within, because we're looking at the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body. We're right here, the waters within. So Osset is our noon within, and the oceans, our rivers, the Niles, the Milky Way galaxy have correspondence with the waters of noon. And just as our oceans and rivers have been polluted, so too have the waters of Osset, noon, within us been polluted. Now, family, it is in the waters of the mother deep. So what does it mean that those waters are polluted with all of those images? In the waters of the mother deep, what are these waters for? What do they reveal? It is in the waters of the mother deep, because Osset is within us. You can locate this part of your spiritual anatomy just below, half an inch below the navel, the waters within. It is in the waters of the mother deep that the Father or Sir is reflected. We're able to see from those waters the reflection of the Father or Sir, because it is only she who can behold and hold his image and likeness, as she is the womb of the one true self, as like our Sir. And she is able to hold that image and likeness without diminishment, without distortion, without fracture. So it is upon her still clear waters that the luminous mirror reflection of our Sir, the Neb Lord of the world within us, is seen. And she is ceaseless and persevering devotion to regather the broken body of our Sir. So she is working with the law of repulse to regather what was broken and was not reflecting unitive consciousness. And it is through our meditation practice that we must cultivate this space we're in, where storms are not, this most sacred real estate that we could ever possess. And it is using the law of repulse. Again, family, what is the law of repulse? It is a law, when used, harnesses the will to dissipate misappropriated energy, that which would disrupt unitive consciousness. Now, isn't our beloved mother set within, working to regather the broken body of an image and likeness of Osir in those fractured waters, using the law of repulse in our Kemetic technology for remaking ourselves as beings of light? We must invoke erasure of the fragmentation, false desire, and false images that would threaten to distort the true reflection of the Father or Sir within and upon the waters of Mother Matter or set within. So, family, we ask, so when we are asked to love the white man and whiteness and hate ourselves, there is something wrong with this picture. Similarly, when the white man loves himself and hates us, there is something wrong with this picture also. Both use actions of hate, actions that move out of unity or move into disunity. And because we have been impacted, we need healing. And how, African family, how do we heal? It is by the use of our spirit of remembrance. I'm going to make a distinction around how we heal as Africans and how those who would use a white supremacist paradigm might approach the same subject. But the use of our spirit of remembrance is that we must invoke erasure from Osset. We must evoke erasure from her, the long accumulated muck and mired trauma images, all that which would fracture these waters, distort the image and likeness of the Father or Sir within. And the installed images of a white supremacist paradigm, we must invoke erasure of those installed images of a white supremacist paradigm that elicit movements of the waters within and elicit corresponding mental movement and corresponding bodily discomfort. Think about how uncomfortable we even feel in our skin when we see and behold images outside with violence that is occurring for African people. Using our Kemetic technology, we understand that our page can feel frozen as we have become fastened like Velcro in these traumatic images. So how to see the way to remember the one true self in these fragmented waters. So we use our Kemetic technology of remaking ourselves as beings of light, in that we must hit the refresh button within ourselves and re-immerse ourselves in these primal waters of the new, understand what these waters are, how sacred they are, and we hit the refresh button within ourselves by immersing ourselves in the source, through the source and study of our primal wisdom. Now that is a mouthful right there, the source and the study of our primal wisdom, because we have been cut off from our primal wisdom. African family, beloveds, how many households even have this book? Good copies, so I'm gonna hold it up. How many households even have this book to even access that which would get us right and straight and in full sight of the God of the Necharu that we are? But how are we to come by this wisdom? We must come by this wisdom first within ourselves, which means we must repulse the disc that has been inserted as software in our hardware. Right here, it is physical, emotional, mental level. That disc that's been inserted right here, so we can tap back into our own software. We must tap back into our own software and understand what has been happening to shave off our mental capacity, to shave off our emotional and physical capacities. We must repulse the disc that has been inserted in our software, the disc, the white supremacist software that has been inserted in our hardware, and reinstall our own software by tapping back into the source of that software. And it is Haru, it is in our Haru, right here in the heart, in our triangle, that we use that purificatory fire within our heart to transmute the coarse emotional matters that have happened, that have occurred, such as anger, fear, bitterness, pain, and the attendant mental imaging, that all this must be transmuted into that pure gold that we may be a healing balm in the world, which serves the greater good. Now, we talked about the dualities and the dissonance that all of this brings to weave together, because dissonance number one is as follows. In a white supremacist paradigm, there is no plan to use the very wisdom they have stolen for the healing of themselves. Think about that, family. There is no plan to use the very wisdom that they have stolen for the healing of themselves. Moreover, they don't profess to even need healing. A white supremacist paradigm has no demonstrated usage of the software of the heart, moving into the ob triangle and then the ba triangle. Family, you don't aspire to a greater self by suppressing another self along the way. This is in violation of the law of Ma'at. You don't aspire to a greater self by suppressing another self along the way, whose goal is to achieve the same one true self. You don't aspire to be the image and likeness of your God while suppressing others. Instead, for whites, theirs has been a misappropriation of energy designed to cause a collapse in self-esteem, self-estimation of Black, brown people, of who and what they truly are. Traumatizing events producing emotion and corresponding thought images. This is by design to make us think and feel ourselves into less and less. This is inferiority. Yet, as we learn to examine more fluidly between the education in the classroom and the education in religion and spirituality, we move to the bigger question, dissonance number two. Can those which have been made to feel inferior be in the image and likeness of the same God that both so-called inferior and superior are so-called worshiping? I mean, you think about Sunday morning, you got Black people in Black churches, you got white people in white churches. So the question is, can those which have been made to feel inferior be in the image and likeness of the same God that both so-called inferior and superior are so-called worshiping? Think about that, the dissonance. Next, whites have made themselves superior and therefore in their minds, the one more closely approximating God. So, like further along, Dissonance number three. But how have you made yourself superior, white people? You have made yourself superior by and through the absolute, total, and persistent violations of the laws of Ma'at through millennia up to now. Whites have not even embraced the very 10 commandments, which they have abstracted from the 42 laws of Ma'at when Christianity was established. So I ask you, African family, how does this work? Dilemma number 4. It doesn't work. It is faulty software because white supremacy is the violation of the laws of Ma'at. Therefore, an image and likeness of God nature cannot be seen when the work in the Ab triangle, the work of the heart, is not done. One cannot behold the image and likeness of God nature in the Ab triangle when in the heart when the work is not done. Next, or one needs to see an image and likeness of God that forgives all sins, no matter what. And the work of developing conscience and having a conscience of one's actions is not done. The work is plain not done. Now, our primal wisdom source teaches one had to measure up and be found innocent before the scales of my eye. There is no vicarious atonement. Each and every one of us, like our need, is held accountable. This is our primal wisdom. To tie this to critical race theory again, there are these objections, is that in critical race theory, the objection is that, quote, our kids will be made to feel guilty. This is the objection. The objection in critical race theory is that our kids will be made to feel guilty. Well, family, what I say is white guilt would be a good place to start. Yes, Martha Mendez says, no vicarious atonement. Ashe, no, thank you. White guilt would be a good place to start because we have to look at the predominant fear in white. The predominant emotion in whites is fear. Fear, they have become one-noters in terms of hitting that fear button all the time. But when we unpack that fear, what we find is hate, is anger, is envy, is greed, is malice, is cruelty, is treachery, is pain, is insecurity, anxiety, and then guilt. Start with guilt. Start with guilt. Do the work of the heart to transmute the guilt. We repulse white supremacy by our adherence to the laws of Ma'at. Your software holds up no image and likeness of God nature or one that ignores wrongdoing. So we repulse white supremacy because of our adherence to the laws of Ma'at. Because we see that your software holds up no image and likeness of God, nature, or it holds up one that ignores wrongdoing. We all have equal access in striving for realization of and as the one true self, realized beingness or ser. Dissonance number 5. The image of white superiority is held up and sustained by the repeated violation of the laws of Ma'at. So to approximate more this image as likeness of godliness is to be in violation of the laws of Ma'at. Think about that, how white superiority maintains itself by the suppression, by robbery, by the rape, by the plunder, by amassing huge fortunes while others live impoverished. Think about how to hold up an image of white supremacy is to approximate more of that image is to, which is held up as the likeness of godliness, is to, for ourselves, be in violation of the laws of Ma'at. So wait, we have been off on someone else's software, family. White Supremist Paradigm software does not lead us where we want to go. Our Kemetic software teaches and directs us that we must go through the Ob triangle, through the Ba triangle. And family, even their own Bible teaches them about the camel trying to get through the eye of the needle and what must be done. Can you get to and through the Ob triangle, the weighing of the heart, to get to the Ba triangle as like Oppressor without doing the work? Resoundingly no. Family, this is a spiritual glass ceiling in human development. It is fundamental. It is a fundamental crisis that the waters of Osset are filled with white supremacy dregs of confusion. For whites, transmuting guilt would be a good place to start. But they deny, avoid this emotion in the waters of their Osset and the corresponding thought images guilt would elicit. You know, if you have the book Without Sanctuary in your library, you see them looking at images of Black people that they staged for hangings, these picnics, and they have those images, and they have disconnected the healing response to those images. No, how is let's look at the clock because we're just about that time. How is these emotions instructive? Because every emotion leads us to what is indicated for our healing. If we feel guilt, then what we do is we just follow where it leads. The images that come up that support that feeling of guilt, and you're getting closer, you know, there you are, and you look up and it indicates the correct action. I need to apologize. I need to ask for forgiveness. For whites, transmuting guilt would be a good place to start. They have desired to feel pride at their achievements while causing Black, brown people to feel shame in the classroom at Black symbol images. The very images that were installed in our devices, physically, emotionally, mentally, to instill shame, were eliciting pride in theirs. This is shameful. This is shameful. So family, we must hit the refresh button within ourselves and feel the calming, cleansing, purification, oh, 3 times. 3 times is a charm. Purification of Mother Osset and her renewed reflective clarity and receptivity to the Father Oppressor upon the clear, limpid surface of her waters within. This is the divine marriage and unification within, as the mother now in her clarity and stillness reflects the one true self-realized Osirian beingness throughout eternity. Everlasting peace, Hotep. The pain of the oppressed and the pain of the oppressor must be transmuted. As we come to the vertex in the V, this inflection point, in this pain of transmutation, let us tap into the fiery passion of justice that is churned, specific and necessary for fulfilling our soul work and service. And let us remember that love is eternal, that love is the underlying coherent power, that unitive consciousness that heals all seeming appearance or of fragmentation and creation, and is the necessary and lasting alchemical end product in making the heart as light as a feather on the scales of my arts. I'm going to come here and I'm right on time, just about just 3 minutes over. I'm just going to see what questions you may have. 2 questions, okay. Does this mean we must raise our vibration in order for us to rid ourselves from this mentality or live in both worlds? Excellent question. And the answer is we must rid ourselves from this mentality and recognize that the dissonance that I have spoken of today in these struggles is the struggle we have had in our back and forth, how to do this. If we do this, there's still this. If we do that, this doesn't work. If we do that, this doesn't work. And we have become very rehearsed in trying to work this out, trying to use the law of repulse, trying to have greater discernment about how the law of attraction has been at work to the point we've attracted that which has made us toxic, and now utilizing more the law of repulse. And the other, Linda says, are whites really human or are they another species? I'm going to do another presentation that answers that, Linda. And then Horace says, is it possible for those who have been complicit with white supremacy to attain access beyond the Ab? Though I just want to stay with Linda's question, I want to do a presentation on this. I actually have some YouTube videos up on this question, Linda, that we are one human family. We are one human family, and yet we are not the same in what we are conscious of. And there is a consciousness, there is how we move within the first eye to see more fully. And we move within the eye to see the part, the relationship between parts and the whole, or one at a timeness and simultaneous all at onceness. And in this white supremacist paradigm, that seeing the part has become collapsed into a separative consciousness, where the reason why we have to affirm today Black Life Matters, which which when you think about it on a spiritual level, is like an absurd thing to have to say. Why would you have to say Black life matters? You know, we say all life matters. The trees matter, the oceans matter, the whales matter. Why would we have to say that? Because we live amongst a white supremacist separative consciousness where they affirm only I matter, only I matter. And so this is to move humanity into a greater way of seeing and knowing and consciousness, and to move and have more of the activation of the first eye. This is the loss of the eye. And it's only the heart and the eye are connected. We can't see more fully if we don't do the work in the heart. It's all connected physiologically, psychologically. And this science needs to be taught to them, the very ones who took our stuff. They translated, but they still don't know what it says. So they can see how to undo the damage that has been done to them. We are working on the damage that has been done to us. And I saw a question. So Linda, we will do more there. And I saw Horace, I think it was Horace. Let me see in the chat. Is it possible for those, yes, and we'll end on this because we're going way over. Is it possible for those who have been complicit with white supremacy to attain access beyond the Ob triangle and make their hearts as light as a feather in the hall? This question is in response to those who say there is no salvation for the whites. The answer is there is no way. It is not possible for those who are not doing the work of the heart, not doing the work to fully indwell the Ob triangle. They're not doing the work of developing conscience and consciousness. You know, when you say someone has no, what conscience did I don't even want to call his name, the officer who killed George Floyd, murdered him in the street. What conscience is there? So if one is not doing the work of conscience and consciousness, they're not developing the heart, and subsequently they're not, the eye and the heart are connected. We can't do one without the other. And so so they need to use the kinetic technology to heal themselves, but they don't even think they're in need of healing. They don't want their children to feel the first human emotion, guilt. That would be a good place to start. All right, beloveds, we could go on. Let me just see some of the comments that you, beloveds, took the time to write. Everyone, Grand Rising, beautiful analogy. Horace says, no vicarious atonement. Ashe, Rosa, and they are not concerned with Black students' self-esteem. Kathy says this only with the white students. They're using reverse psychology, yes, to try to make us feel guilty for speaking on the evil they have and are doing to us. And this is why, family, you know, Spirit has me working behind the scenes a lot, because many, first of all, could not comprehend today's talk. And those who could comprehend couldn't take the talk that I gave today. But it is as much a spiritual prescription for those who have been oppressed as for those who have been the oppressor. But one has to know that they have work to do and be willing to do the work. And because, and then as Mende said, as I had reflected, there is no vicarious atonement. All right, beloveds. So, in closing, Laura says, the ancestral wise wisdom shared, much appreciated. Mayor Ashe, Mayor Asha, much love, much love. Thank you so much for your presence today and your participation. And we see what we must do. Andrea, to all, so very powerful. Ashe, Ashe. We see what we must do. I say to you in closing, Onk Uja Seneb. Linda says, thank you, everyone. Onk Uja Seneb. Ashe.